It's time for the Wrestling Observer Extra.
I said one more time for old time's sake.
With Dave Meltzer, right here on The Law. Live audio wrestling.
And let's go. We're now smoking with the best.
Welcome back. It is The Law. Live audio wrestling. Into hour 2 we go. And we are supposed to be joined by Dave Meltzer at this time.
We're good,
we
I think.
do have
We're
Dave.
good.
We've tracked
We're
him
good.
down.
We found him again.
There's so many phones.
He
but
can't escape us.
Dave, we will always track you down. Just know, we're like a terrible ex-girlfriend.
You can't escape us, Dave. We will find you.
Well, Dave, this week we saw the debut of Samoa Joe, and unfortunately, it may be the loss of Seth Rollins. We've talked about it a bit on the show already, but at present, torn MCL, diagnosis for Rollins. At this point, we don't know if he will be at WrestleMania, correct?
I think they'll have a pretty good idea of the plan tomorrow night because it's like the diagnosis. The first diagnosis we heard was 6 to 8 weeks, in which case he kind of just makes it. But the question is do you want to spend the next 2 months building something up? What if he doesn't make it? I mean, the whole thing is as far as being cautious or I mean, are you going to risk it or are you going to get a clean bill of health? Or are you going to go in there with the idea that it's WrestleMania, he's going to make it? I think we'll know what the decision is tomorrow night.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, it really seems to be WWE kind of policy lately to not take these crazy chances like they would in the past. I mean, the fact that they won't let Daniel Bryan, even though I know that's concussion rather than knee, but I would think that if he's in rough shape that they would probably just work on something new. And, unfortunately he misses 2 Manias in a row.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it is a knee, and it's going to be like, what I mean? It's like he'll want to do it. So I think that unless it's something a little bit more severe than is out, that they might go with it. But I mean, it's one of those things where they do kind of have to make the choice one way or the other now because they've got to start in whatever direction they're going. They got to go in the direction. And if it is Seth Rollins, obviously they have to change how they get there because how they get there was going to be Seth Rollins against Samoa Joe, and they had probably all these angles laid out, and those are obviously all out the window now.
And so let's talk about those plans because what you have right now is the long-awaited, and I do mean long-awaited debut of Samoa Joe on the main roster. You basically gave him a green light going in, putting him into a top program with the top guy. Now you have a stop sign here. And what you don't want to do is have a stop sign for this juggernaut of Samoa Joe. What do you do with Joe at the next pay-per-view without Rollins being around to have a match with?
Yeah, they're going to have to plug somebody in there essentially to be a sacrificial lamb, I think that's the only choice. So it's just like, do you go with? I mean, and I don't know who that guy is. I mean, Sami Zayn is like they're kind of like the Raw brand sacrificial lamb, but he's already booked with Jericho. Yeah. So I don't know who you go with. But yeah, I think that you can't just shut down Samoa Joe because then it kills all the momentum.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very tough choice. I mean, and you don't want to bring somebody else up from NXT because then that's, you want to give someone a chance to be brought up properly. So, I mean, you have to draw from the Raw roster, and there's not a really lot of spare bodies you could put with them.
Well, I mean, there's guys, but, everyone's kind of has their place. You know what I mean? It's like, you could put Cesaro in there, but Cesaro and Sheamus are kind of working with Gallows and Anderson.
Yeah.
You can move New Day to Gallows and Anderson, even though it's been done before. And, there's different ways you can do it, but it's not impossible, but it's not easy either.
On the SmackDown side of things, it seems as though everything is going according to plan. And we talked about the flip-flopping of the title that will potentially happen. It looks like that's going to go forth at the Elimination Chamber. My question for you is John Cena popping the question at WrestleMania?
That one, man, I don't know. I mean, once you say it's the weirdest thing because it's I mean, if it's the plan, then they'll do it. If it's not the plan, who knows?
I guess it depends.
It's one of those things where where you can see it, because as far as like real life and storyline, it all kind of coincides. It's the time and the place.
Well, that's it.
And if she's retiring, it's really the time and the place.
I think
so. I mean, I can see it.
Honestly, Dave, to me, it's obviously the culmination of a whole season of Total Divas. I mean, I would think that's why they're doing this match, is it's more towards Total Divas than WrestleMania.
Well, if it's her retirement, she's never done the mixed tag with him, and she's never had. I mean, she's had matches at WrestleMania, but she's never had this high a profile match. So it is a way to go out in a certain way, either way. But yeah, it's if it's the culmination of her career, I can see it. If the culmination of her career is the happily ever after ending, then that's the way to go.
Dave, do you know if this plan was originally for Ambrose and Renee at Mania?
I don't know, but it easily could have been. I mean, it certainly looked like it was going to be, because it was Cena and Undertaker until whatever it was, about 4 weeks ago. When was it that they changed it? I mean, Cena and Undertaker was the WrestleMania plan, and that switched, and that's when probably this thing. But then there was even talk of Cena and Samoa Joe, if you remember.
Oh, yes. That would have been. I would have loved that. Yeah.
So this is something that was decided probably. I would say in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the longest. This one wasn't a long-term plan. And if you go back 4 weeks, they had just started the thing with Maurice and Renee Young. So yeah, I mean I think that's probably what the original idea was.
And now Ambrose is lost. Moving on to Lucha Underground. Some developments. As of last week, we didn't know when it would be returning. We now have a hard date, May 31st on El Rey, and a contract with Netflix, both American and Canadian. All set in stone and confirmed at this point, February 15th?
I've heard it confirmed in Canada, but not the United States 100%. But it's certainly the date that's going around. And it's for the first 2 seasons. It's not for the current season. So, I mean, it's something. It's more exposure. They need more exposure. The fact that they have a date going back, I mean, it's a lot better than no date. So, but they had, the thing that I remember about Lucha Underground is last year when I went to WrestleMania in Dallas, Lucha Underground was the hot thing. I mean, it was like we're sitting there and it's like, man, if Lucha Underground would have done a show at WrestleMania, they would have, been able to sell out a 3,000-seat building easily. And everybody was talking about Pentagon, and now it is like almost a year later, and I don't, even though Pentagon himself is kind of hot, I don't think Lucha Underground's hot at all.
No. The fact that they're coming back with the rest of season 3 on May the 31st is that just because it's going to be on Netflix and they want to get it out there? Because that seems a strange time to come back in the beginning of summer when really people aren't watching TV that much.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the idea was, and maybe, I think it goes till some point in October.
Yeah.
But they wanted it on in September when their new season started to help, like, the build for some of their other new shows in September. So I think that's the reason for the delay. Because, originally there was going to be no delay.
Right.
So, and you could tell, if you watch the show every week, you could see that there was, when this thing was filmed, there was very clearly no idea there was going to be any kind of a break.
Right.
They were... The last show, they were building a match with John Morrison and the Mac for an all night long 1 hour match, and they were basically teasing it for next week, and next week is months later now.
Mm-hmm.
With the Netflix deal, with the return to El Rey, has there been any rumblings of the 4th season and its potential?
Well, there's been talk of filming in November, December. Definitely talk of that, but it's like everything. You never know until it really happens. It's like the ITV thing in the UK. It's like there's lots of talk of it, but I haven't heard the official word that it's a go. And you know how the TV business goes. It's like, you hear it's always yes, yes, yes until the day that it's no. So right now we're still at the yes, 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 but that doesn't mean it doesn't end up being a no.
And what about all the stuff with AAA in conjunction with Lucha Underground and guys leaving there that were working back and forth? Is that to me sounds like it's going to be problems for them in a new season as well?
It's a real interesting thing because you're talking about like Pentagon, who was one of their hottest guys and sexy stars. They built so much around. Phoenix. I mean, the feeling is that they're going to keep them in Lucha Underground because if they keep them in Lucha Underground, they're not free agents in the United States. Because if they're free agents in the United States, all of a sudden, they're free to go to WWE, and WWE wants to do a Mexico tournament. So that there's kind of a fit, and I think that I think that everybody in Mexico does not want WWE to come to Mexico and do a Mexican tournament because they kind of know the history of wrestling.
Right.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Kevin Kelly, leaving Ring of Honor as far as his full-time position goes, does this change any of his on-air work with ROH?
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to remain the lead announcer, if he's going to be a sometimes announcer. I was told that he was definitely going to still have a role in Ring of Honor as an on-camera person, but not as an office person. I guess that the New Japan thing will come first. And there's going to be, he's going to Japan on a regular basis all year. I mean, you saw the schedule.
Yeah.
This week they're doing 3 shows this week. They did the one the other night. They're doing a Tuesday show, and then they're doing the weekend show.
So who do you see ending up getting in? With Steve Corino gone, Nigel McGuinness is gone now, Kevin Kelly. I mean, they're getting devastated when it comes to their commentary team. Do you see anybody that's going to be put into this position, or what would you expect? The Ian, who I'm not sure of his last name, but he did the shows over the weekend. So I would guess that he's the lead, candidate for the spot if Kevin Kelly's not around. It's gonna really change it without Kevin Kelly and Corino, because I thought those two had such great chemistry, and it was one of my favorite things about Ring of Honor.
Yeah, well, Corino is gone, no matter what.
Yeah.
And I know. And it was funny watching the New Japan, late last night.
Right, with Callis instead.
It was different.
Yes.
It was different without Corino. Don Callis, I thought did a pretty good job for a first time.
Yeah.
But it still was a different. Don Callis will be a completely different character than Steve Corino.
Yes.
Steve Corino
Yes, he
was a
will.
lot more humor. Don Callis is more kind of that old school heel promo guy who still puts over the kind of like a Jesse Ventura type of character.
Right.
And finally, Dave, so the XFL, this was the XFL aired, the 30 for 30 special on ESPN. Did you get a chance to see it?
Oh, yeah.
What did you think?
It's like there's going to be little things here and there when it comes to the facts where, I would have a different slant on certain things. I thought that they, their slant was that the football wasn't good and there were some mistakes made, and it's not a wrong slant on it. I think some people thought that they should have gone a little bit harder, but look, it's Charlie Ebersole doing it, and his father was one of the main guys, and Vince is one of his father's best friends, so it was a very sympathetic look at them. Like with the Costas interview with Vince, the way it was edited, it's like, I remember that interview, and that was not one of Vince's better days.
No.
And they did, even Dick Ebersole said this really wasn't a good idea. But when you watched it, you really, you almost got it where Bob Costas was the one who was badgering Vince as opposed to Vince just kind of losing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they played with the facts a little bit. Didn't they say something like Vince had established his wrestling empire by 1979 or something like that?
Yeah. The wrestling stuff, without a doubt, that should have been fact checked. He didn't go national in 79, and in 2001, whatever he did, he didn't unify the business of pro wrestling in 2001
right.
when he bought WCW. He did something, but that's not the right wording.
It did come across to me watching it as like there were many moments of, well, this should have worked, but unfortunately there was a blackout, and everything was working against them.
Yeah. That
True.
is the one thing in the sense of, the generator and all that. It's like, honest to God, that generator had 0.000% to do with success or failure. It was a one-day annoyance like anything. Like, the night when, what was it?
The NFL blackout.
Remember there was a night on Nitro where something went down? And it's like, that's not why Nitro died either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it seemed like watching this
piece.
piece.
Remember the Beware of Dog pay-per-view?
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh my God, that because of that, WWE, went down the tubes in the war with WCW. It's like, it was an annoying day. It had nothing to do with the long term.
Right.
Dave, wrapping for this week, but what is coming up in the Observer?
I got a story on Tom Drake, who's an absolutely fascinating character. He was a politician in Alabama who was an amateur and pro wrestler, very good at both, and who was with Cauliflower Alley, who just passed away, and, coverage of the New Japan show, coverage of Raw and SmackDown for this week coming up, and whatever else comes up, and the UFC show, and what happens with Seth Rollins and the whole road to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Do you think next week Holly Holm will have a big piece of gold around her waist?
Man, that's a tough one. She didn't look good in her last couple of fights, but I still got to favor her just based on experience.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you about that next week for that useless 145 title in the women's division in UFC. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, have a great week.
You too. We'll talk to you next week. WrestlingObserver.com is where you can find all of Dave's fine work.